Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you, and we have here a mini sheep. So that probably tells you what review we're going to be working on today. If you have a mini sheep, you need a mini sheepdog, and that is the knife we're going to be taking a look at. This was sent to me by Kizer for review. If you want to pick one of these up, I would recommend you go over to White Mountain Knives, use my discount code SHARPSTUFF, and pick one up. I think they have some of these in stock, and they probably have some of the other variations as well. If you don't know, this has been a very popular model for Kizer, and as such, this is available in a number of variations. So this happens to be the mini sheepdog in titanium frame lock. There's also a mini sheepdog that's a G10 liner lock, G10 with stainless steel liners. There's a larger version of this knife, both in the titanium frame lock as well as in the G10 liner lock, which would be the Vanguard series. And then they're coming out with an even larger sheepdog that's going to be, at least at this point, the only one I've seen is a G10 liner lock version. I don't know if there's plans to bring it out in titanium as well or not. I guess we'll see what happens as time goes by. But lots of variations of this knife. So if this is not the one that you really, really love, even this particular size is available in bronze anno or plain gray anno. And the first thing I've got to say before we move any further with this review is take a look at the pivot screw. I'm not talking about the anodizing, but finally the toilet flushing pivot screw is gone. And I'm really, really happy that it has gone away. Hopefully, or looking forward to other Kizers that are not sporting that really annoying pivot screw. I was not a fan of that at all. So let's go ahead and get into this. You guys know that this is not really in my wheelhouse in terms of the size of knife that I like to carry, but you don't look a gift horse in the mouth. And so when Kizer asked if I was interested in having them send this along for review, I know that a lot of you like smaller knives. In fact, a number of you have requested that I do a few smaller knives. So this was a great opportunity to be able to bring a small knife to you guys so you could sort of get my take on that. By the way, I'm going to try to set that bias aside. You'll especially see when I talk about ergonomics, that's one of the things that puts me off is the handle is quite small, but the knife is quite small. So try to be fair in our assessment of that. Now, thinking of small, this guy is quite little, 6 3/16 overall, 2 5/8 on the blade length, 3 9/16 on the handle size there, sorry about that, and 3.2 ounces. Now 3.2 ounces is a pretty hefty knife or a pretty hefty weight for a knife of this size, but as you can see, we're talking about a full titanium frame lock, so there's a fair bit of metal involved in the construction here. While we're talking about numbers and sizes, let's point out this has 2 7/8 inches of grip area, and it has 2 7/16 inches of cutting edge. So that is, from there to there. All right, those are numbers that I'm not in love with, but I know, again, there'll be a few of you who really like that. And this is a very small, very diminutive little knife. And I must say this. In the full-size version of this, the blade comes across to me as almost just a little too blocky, a little too overpowering to the design. But in the smaller version, somehow, even though I think the proportions are about the same, it just seems to work better for me from an aesthetic standpoint. So I find the smaller version is a little more well balanced or something like that. I don't know exactly how to express it, but I just feel like this design is something I'm a little more interested in. Maybe I'm a little more forgiving with a blade style like this in a small knife, whatever the case may be. I do find out of, comparing the two knives, this one just seems to look a little more appealing to me. Okay, now having gotten that out of the way in terms of a design question, I know there'll be some of you who love the larger one as well, and that's totally fine. So S35VN on this blade, let's take a close look at it here. So we've got S35VN with a stonewash finish, very nice Warncliffe style blade, high flat grind. This is going to slice pretty nicely, and I can tell you from experience, it does slice pretty nicely. Obviously, you're limited to the amount of distance you can slice. So if you're cutting, let's say, an apple in half or an orange or something, you may not have the reach to get all the way across. But if you're, if this is primarily the kind of thing you're, I don't know, opening mail with or cutting a little bit of cord now and then or something, even cutting cardboard, the length of the blade doesn't really affect its usefulness all that much. The other nice thing about this small blade and this particular blade shape is this is extremely non-threatening, right? I don't think anyone is going to get upset if you pull this little guy out in just about any circumstance and start doing some cutting or something like that. I guess the only place you probably wouldn't be able to use this would be on an airplane. And even some airlines, I can't remember what it is in Canada, but in Canada there's a specification that a knife probably under 2 inches. So this one doesn't quite make it. But anyway, in virtually all circumstances outside of this, you could probably pull this knife out and use it and not get a second look, which is really pleasant. And this, I think, makes this really, really a good option as a sort of a secondary carry. If your EDC that day is something large and maybe a little bit tactical looking like this, well, throw this in your pocket for those moments where maybe you don't want to pull out the larger knife, and that can work really well. And I know a number of you carry a secondary knife like that, and I do myself sometimes as well. So definitely get that. In terms of usefulness on this blade, I think really nice blade shape, highly effective for, sort of chopping tasks. If you're cutting on a surface, this is going to work really well. S35VN is great steel, and Kizer seems to do a pretty good job with it. I don't know too many people that don't do a good job with it, but there you go. So blade here, I think, is really, really nice as long as you're not doing the kind of things that require more cutting edge, because it just isn't there. So I think this blade is a win, and it's in this particular version, I think it works well aesthetically also. Now, if I were reviewing the larger version, I kind of don't love the blade. It's somehow it puts me off. So I don't find it very attractive. In this version, it doesn't put me off nearly as much. Okay, so there we go. Let's move on now to action. Lockup and deployment is how we normally talk about this. This, of course, is a flipper deployed knife. It's on bearings with a frame lock, and it works pretty well. Now you can see the problem I'm having there. Okay, so that's my one issue with the action, and that is, in order to unlock this knife, I generally put my finger right here. Well, look what happens. There's a detent ball there, and the knife wants to pop that stupid detent ball back out, meaning I end up having to fiddle with the knife a little bit to get it closed. All right, and that's just a matter of where the detent ball is located. So if I get the knife closed to about, I'll just show you. So that's where the detent ball pops over the blade. Okay, notice though, there's really not enough room for a finger in here. Barely is there enough room. So I can just, if I give it a little bit of thought before, I can move my thumb down a little bit and open the blade, no problem. But I can't tell you how many times I've just went to close this and realized, oh, I'm not quite getting past the detent ball. So a lot of knives have that issue, by the way. You may remember there have been a couple of zero tolerances that Rob, the Apostle P, complained about. You get used to it. Okay, so that's what I would say about that. I don't like when knives do that, and I feel like if they'd reduce the size of this flipper tab a little bit, I wouldn't have as much of a problem with it. Yeah, you can see it's happening there again. It's hard to get my finger out of the way. All right. Otherwise, though, I find the action on this quite smooth. It feels very clean. It feels very precise. I would actually say this feels a little nicer than some of the Kizers I have tried. So, gotta give, I feel like Kizer the last couple of years is kind of stepping up their game a little bit and really hitting some nicer quality levels. And this one certainly feels that way. All right, so that's action, lockup and deployment. Of course, lockup is very solid. I mean, do I even need to say that on a Kizer titanium frame lock? I don't think I've ever had a Kizer of any kind that had issues with the lock, any kind of blade play or anything like that. So that's pretty much a given at this point. Now, what about the handle? Well, the handle, we're going to kind of have two discussions, because I will say, in terms of quality, in terms of the look, in terms of fit and finish, it is very, very good. I really like this handle. I especially like the fact that there's some interesting detail going on here. That's a really welcome change for me. I often, well, you guys know Kizers have often been, just sort of slab-sided titanium. There are a few variants out there. I mean, there are a few exceptions out there, but lots of slab-sided titanium. This is really nice. There's some neat little cutouts here. There's different anodizing colors on the screws. And then we've got that really nice bright blue pivot collar. Anodized again on the pocket clip. So really nice little knife there in terms of overall quality and appearance. Now, what I'm not such a big fan of is that for me, this is a 3-finger knife. My pinky's kind of left floating out here in space, and I don't really like that. Now, some of you who always carry smaller knives and really enjoy smaller knives, you'll have no problem with that because that's kind of what you're used to. I'm used to carrying something much more substantial that's going to be a little more hand-feeling, and that's certainly going to give me a spot for my pinky. So for me, that puts me off quite a bit. And I really feel like I don't want to get into anything more difficult with this knife. Now, in fairness, I did go ahead and do some cutting with this. I cut up some cardboard, I cut up some food, and a few other things. And honestly, it's fine. It really is. But always in the back of my mind, there's just this feeling that something's not right because I don't have room for that pinky. Now, let me suggest one change that would make a huge difference. If they had utilized this area here, instead of as a really long, big flipper tab, if they'd given me a spot to choke up, I think this would be a very different discussion. All right, so I'll just put that out there. There are some smaller knives that do that kind of thing, and I really appreciate it. Not that this one has to do it to be good. It's fine. It's just a 3-finger knife, and I sort of have to modify my expectations to sort of fit that. All right. Now, having gotten all that stuff out of the way, I really like the overall look. The quality is very good. The ergonomics are fine. I mean, it's comfortable for the 3 fingers that I can get on it, but I wish I had that little bit of extra space that I feel like could have been made up somewhere in this area. But overall, I think it's decent. All right. Now, let's go ahead and get to some comparisons. You guys know I'm not going to have much that compares well to this knife, but I thought I'd bring in a couple of knives, mostly because you're quite familiar with them. So there is a Paramilitary 2. You guys are all very familiar with the Para 2. A knife that reminds me of this a little bit, but does a little better job in the ergonomics department is the recently released Civivi Anthropos. And it has quite a bit more cutting edge, but it's actually, I don't know, to me, let's close it down and see. The Anthropos is bigger for sure, okay? But the Anthropos does something interesting in giving me a fair bit more handle and in giving me that spot to choke up, which I do appreciate. I thought I'd throw that guy in there. Now, I do want to bring in a couple of things here. So first off, I'm going to bring in the zero tolerance 0640, not because I feel like these are highly comparable, but because ZT has done a couple of smaller knives. And so there are like the 909, there's another one that's evading me right now. I just can't think of the name of it for you. But then the most recent one, like the 202, I believe, or the 0900 and the 202 are smaller ZTs that would probably compare to this. Now I do have this one totally different knife. This is the PMP Revenge. Great knife, but it's kind of interesting. These have a very similar blade shape, and I've kind of thought, hey, kind of neat to put these two side by side. So I think, to be fair, I really like the design on the PMP Revenge here, and I'm not in love with the design on the larger size of the Sheepdog. So to kind of give you an idea, I'm not being unfair. Now, on the small size, I think this looks pretty cool. Finally, let's bring in one other knife. This is another overseas made knife. This is, of course, the Riot Torrent, one of my all-time favorite high-end folders. Actually, one of my all-time favorite knives in general. And I just thought I'd throw that in there only because, there are some other high-end Chinese companies such as Riot, such as We, that do some smaller stuff like this. I think the 605 from We is in a similar size category. Anyway, those are some comparisons for you. I know they're not super related, but it gives you an idea of size, and it does bring to mind some other options that are out there. Finally, what is my overall thought? Do I recommend this? Do I love it? Do I hate it? well, this knife is definitely too small for me. But if you're a person who likes small knives, or if you're a person, I definitely see the appeal of this as a really nice, kind of cool backup knife. This is a knife that, its design I could find being quite appealing even to non-knife people. So they've really done a good job, I think, with the design. I love the variation here that kind of keeps, what would you say? That departs a little bit from what we're used to seeing from Kizer, and the quality is absolutely there. So if you're a guy that likes smaller knives and you like this design, I wouldn't hesitate at all. I think they've done a really, really nice job here. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to use that link to White Mountain Knives down in the description box, and we will talk to you soon.